January 2016, Colombo in Sri Lanka. Things haven't been going well for Shalika Perera, but her life is about to change.
Shalika is a businesswoman in her late 30s. She's got big dreams, including becoming a politician one day.
She set up companies in construction, car parts, publishing, catering. None of it's worked out. The losses from her publishing firm were apparently so bad, she was forced to sell off all the computers.
So she's changed tack and decided to go down the philanthropic route. She set up a charity in her own name, the Shalika Foundation, which she says will help build houses for the poor and provide other social services.
And it sounds like her strategy is going to pay off. This could be the one, because her charity's about to get a massive windfall. She's been meeting potential donors from Japan, and one of their middlemen is now confirming an imminent transfer from a big Japanese investment fund. It's $20 million. The middleman even gives her a letter to prove it. It's on headed notepaper and everything. But if you look a bit closer, there are some telltale signs the letter isn't quite on the level. For a start, there are some spelling errors. It also features a sort of grainy, mocked-up graphic showing a stack of banknotes tied up with a yellow ribbon. Not exactly the kind of thing a multi-million-pound investor is known for. Still, as far as Shalika's concerned, things are looking up.
ආපු මේක අපිට ෆවුන්ඩේෂන් එකට ඕනිම ඩොනේෂන් දෙනවා. මෙයා චෙක් එකක් ගෙනාවොත් එයා කියනවා හරි. අපි ඔයාට ෆවුන්ඩේෂන් දෙනවා. අපිට අනිත් ප්‍රොජෙක්ට් එකට අපිට සල්ලි ඕනේ.
This is Shalika speaking in 2016, and she's explaining how important the $20 million donation is to her foundation. She's talking to Shihar Anis. He's a Sri Lankan investigative journalist working for Reuters.
She was telling a lot of stories about, housing, rural electrification, improving the economy of the rural poor.
That all takes money, so this $20 million donation is a big deal for Shalika. It could turn some of her dreams into reality. But then, the Japanese middleman starts changing the terms of the deal.
Shalika says she was now told she'd only get a fraction of the $20 million. The rest would go to the Japanese middleman and his acquaintances.
The Shalika Foundation will get 15%, and those guys will be getting 85%.
Wow.
That was the original agreement.
Yeah, 85% commission is quite good commission, isn't it? I wish I could work a job that had that.
That's right. I mean, that was kind of a, real big question mark. Why 85%? I mean, if it is a foundation and if it is doing charity, the charity should get the large portion.
But for Shalika, it's better than nothing. She tells Shihar that she agreed to the reduced amount because at that stage they didn't have any money for the foundation. After all, 15% of 20 million is, well, still a lot of money.
And so, as instructed, in January 2016, she opens an account at the Colombo branch of the Pan Asia Bank, and she lets them know she's expecting $20 million imminently from a Japanese donor. And then she waits.
But when the money arrives in the account, it all goes wrong.
An eagle-eyed bank employee spots something amiss in the paperwork used to make that $20 million transfer.
There was one O missing in the foundation. It has come as Fundation, F-U-N-D, Foundation.
Instead of Shalika Foundation, the transfer document says Shalika Fundation. Simple spelling mistake, one letter that could easily have gone unnoticed, but it's enough to raise the alarm and trigger extra queries by the bank.
The Pan Asia Bank tries to find out who actually authorized the transfer, and that's when they realize the money isn't from a Japanese investment fund at all. It's never even been in Japan. It's come from the National Bank of Bangladesh, and when they contact them,
they got a message from Bangladesh Bank saying, do not allow this person to withdraw the money.
You've guessed it. The $20 million winging its way to Sri Lanka is part of the money stolen from the Bangladesh Bank by the Lazarus Group, the computer hackers accused of working for the North Korean state.
It turns out Shalika Perera is another key part of those hackers' plans to spirit away Bangladesh Bank's money. It would turn her life upside down. And once again, a tiny mistake by the hackers has derailed their carefully laid plans.
And for me and Jeff, this opens a whole new avenue of investigation, and we go on the trail of this Japanese middleman who orchestrated the donation, and we explore how he might be connected to the Lazarus Group.
Because ultimately, hackers can't operate on keyboards alone. As we've seen throughout this series, they need a network of accomplices in the physical world, or meat space as hackers call it. That's MEAT. Cyberspace is where the computers live, meat space is where the humans live. How do these people get involved? What's in it for them?
From the BBC World Service, this is The Lazarus Heist. I'm Jean Lee.
And I'm Jeff White. Episode 8, The Multi-Million Mistake. The hackers who broke into Bangladesh Bank initially transferred $951 million, $931 million of which was bound for the Philippines, but of course most of that got stopped. But what about that other $20 million? It was bound for Sri Lanka. This was the money Shalika's charity was being promised a share of. It's classic money laundering. Here's how it often works. A fraudster tells a charity they'll be donating a large sum of money on condition the charity sends a big chunk of the donation onto another charity's account. In fact, that's the personal bank account of the fraudster, who's bouncing the money through different accounts to make it harder for investigators to trace. And as a bonus, charities are often exempt from tax, so there's more money left at the end of this process.
That's if you don't make any spelling mistakes on the remittance. Once the Pan Asia Bank gets notified by the Bangladesh Bank that the transfer is fraudulent, they return the $20 million. Meanwhile, Shihar, the journalist, has found out about the incident from one of his sources who works at the bank.
There was a fight in the bank. Two people were fighting for $20 million inflow.
The two people arguing turn out to be Shalika and one of the Japanese middleman's acquaintances. A couple of things about this pique Shihar's journalistic interest.
One was the amount. This $20 million is a huge inflow for a country like Sri Lanka. And then they said, it was for a foundation. If it has come for charity purpose, my concern was why they were fighting.
So he tracks Shalika down through her foundation's registration documents, and the gravity of what she's involved in is finally dawning on Shalika. Her dreams of business and political success are shattered.
By the time I met her, police had arrived to inquire about this. So she was actually worried, but she was firm on saying that she never knew that this was from Bangladesh Bank.
නෑ අපි මෙහෙම money laundering අපි ඇත්තටම කරන්නේ නෑ. පවුදමක් දාලා money laundering.
ඒක නෙයි.
When Shalika spoke to Shihar back in 2016, she denied any wrongdoing. And then she did so again when I contacted her in 2019 when I was researching this story. We had a very strange WhatsApp conversation. She insisted not only that she'd not done anything wrong, but neither had the Japanese middleman, despite the fact that by this time she already knew the money was stolen. She seemed to be trying to protect him somehow. And then she stopped answering my messages. So when we were making this series, we asked Shihar if he could track her down for us.
Shalika Foundation? Shalika nadda? So I went to her house 3 times. First time, one of her neighbors told that she was in prison.
On the second and third occasions, Shihar meets 2 other family members who tell him they don't know where Shalika is.
They had a family issue and Shalika is not there anymore. So it was very difficult to find her.
But Shihar is able to confirm with the police that Shalika is still in Sri Lanka and that she's still a suspect in their ongoing investigation.
But before going dark, Shalika did give Shihar some crucial information. The Japanese middleman who brokered the $20 million transfer had given her some documents. Among them was a business card, which we've seen.
The name on the card? Tadashi Sasaki. This is the man who told Shalika the money was coming. And as police started investigating the Sri Lankan money transfer, Sasaki's name comes up in police reports as well.
I was pretty excited by all this because although Shalika had told me Tadashi Sasaki's name, I really just didn't think he existed. For a start, it's a pretty common name. It's like someone calling themselves John Smith. But sure enough, here was his business card with email addresses, phone numbers, websites, all juicy leads for us to explore.
නේ සෂාගේ ඉතින් ලොකු මේක environment එක මෙයා මෙහෙම එක්කෙනේ කියලා කිව්වනේ මියන්මාර් වලට vehicles මේ වගේ
Shalika says she met Sasaki several times, but because of the language barrier, they only spoke through intermediaries. All she was told about his background was that he was a big-time businessman in Japan.
Here's why Tadashi Sasaki is important. In the Philippines side of the story, there was a long, intricate process between the hackers and the eventual destination of the money. The hackers sent the money to the Philippines bank, it went to the casinos. All of that took ages to set up. It was almost a year.
But the Sri Lankan side is a little bit different. That charity run by Shalika Pereira is told directly by Tadashi Sasaki that the 20 million is coming. And within just a few days, the money's there. So whoever he is, Sasaki seems to be very closely connected with the hackers' network, whether knowingly or unknowingly.
Which leads to another question. How would a Japanese guy get wrapped up in a bank heist attributed to North Korea? It's not as odd as you might think. These two countries' fates have been tied together for decades in all sorts of fascinating ways.
If you recall from episode 3, I shared the story about how the Japanese occupied Korea from 1910 until 1945, and how families like my own were forced to take Japanese names. My family name, Lee, became Shibamura. And during the colonial period, up to 2 million Koreans migrated to Japan, some forcibly as laborers, others of their own will. And when Japan surrendered during World War II, giving up control of Korea in 1945, many of those ethnic Koreans stayed in Japan. Among them, a young Korean-born wrestler who moved to Japan as a teenager and settled into the growing ethnic Korean community in Osaka, that's Japan's second largest city. His daughter was known at school as Hime Takada, and she would grow up to become a dancer who would eventually catch the eye of the North Korean leader. That leader was Kim Jong-il. It's not a well-known fact inside North Korea, but Kim Jong-un's mother wasn't born in Korea, but in Japan. And some people say her mother wasn't even Korean, but Japanese. But that's a detail we can't confirm.
So it turns out there are hundreds of thousands of ethnic Koreans living in Japan. Many of them have been there for generations, but for all that time, they've often faced hostility and discrimination.
One episode that the North Koreans routinely rail against is a massacre that took place in 1923. That's the year a 7.9 magnitude earthquake devastated the Kanto region, and that includes Tokyo, left an estimated 100,000 people dead. And in the chaos that reigned after the quake, Koreans became the scapegoats for the unrest. And historians say vigilante groups and police hunted down and killed at least 6,000 Koreans with swords, with spears, anything they could use as a weapon. The accounts are chilling, and thankfully times have changed, and I can't imagine such blatant discrimination happening in Japan today. But the long history of discrimination against Koreans in Japan, I think, does help explain how their loyalties have been shaped.
And on that front, it's time to hear the story of Yong-hee Yang, a filmmaker who grew up in the Korean community in Osaka. Her father was a prominent leader of the Association for Ethnic Koreans loyal to North Korea in Japan, known as the Chonggyeon.
And we're going to spend some time on her family story because it tells us so much about what it's like to be an ethnic Korean born and raised in Japan, but loyal to North Korea, a country they call their fatherland. And it starts with that sting of discrimination.
One day, my mom was walking on the street with my grandma, wearing a traditional costume. Someone threw out the black ink on my mother's costume. Most Koreans in Japan were in a very bad status because of serious poverty, no human rights, and then very strong ethnic discrimination in Japan. So their status was worse than trash. At that moment, from the north, Kim Il-sung made a beautiful speech.
That was in 1959, but North Korea was able to rebuild with help from the Soviet Union and the Eastern Bloc. In fact, until the early 1970s, North Korea had a stronger economy than South Korea.
So Kim Il-sung said, if you guys, Korean residents in Japan, if you guys believed in us, believed in North Korea as your fatherland, we are going to give you free houses, free medical treatment, and we are going to give a very good job, and we are going to educate you guys, children, free. So why don't you come to North Korea?
That wrestler I mentioned earlier took up that offer and sailed with his family, including his talented daughter, to North Korea in the early 1960s. She shed her Japanese name and became Ko Young-hee. She's the dancer who caught the eye of Kim Jong-il and eventually gave birth to 3 of his children. The youngest is the current North Korean leader, Kim Jong-un.
Young-hee says her father also embraced the North Korean ideology during this time.
They've never lived in North Korea at the time, but they chose North Korea as their fatherland.
Remember, when their families left Korea, it was one country. And then, in 1945, Korea was divided into the communist North and the US-backed South. The ethnic Koreans in Japan, who weren't allowed to become Japanese citizens back then, now had a choice to make. And that means there are 2 separate Korean communities in Japan.
So, while technically living in Japan, Young-hee grows up in a world within a world, the North Korean enclave inside Japan.
Known as Zainichi, these ethnic Koreans in Japan attend special schools where the classes and the songs are in Korean and they study under the portraits of Kim Il-sung and Kim Jong-il.
People really helped each other and then protected each other. That was good part. But simultaneously, the saying any bad words about North Korea was strongly prohibited. We always had to show our loyalty to the Kim family. I didn't like it. So my parents are very passionate to do that. My parents were that kind of people, but I couldn't be like that kind of person.
Her parents would spend the rest of their lives working as pro-North Korean activists.
My father's dream was sending their children to North Korea first and letting them get good education there, because in Japan, everything is related to discrimination. So getting education was also very difficult.
And starting in 1959, her father's dream comes true. With the help of Japan and the Red Cross, North Korea launches a repatriation program with the promise of a return to paradise. And the propaganda promises free education, housing, and medical care, benefits that were elusive to Koreans living in Japan at the time.
Unsurprisingly, perhaps Young-hee's father is immediately keen for his 3 sons to go. Young-hee, being a girl, is expected to stay behind and look after her parents, though.
So the 3 sons are sent as a gift to Kim Il-sung for the leader's birthday. And Young-hee puts on a traditional Korean dress for the occasion. And in one hand, she's carrying a North Korean flag, and with the other, she waves goodbye to her brothers as a ship takes them to North Korea. She was only 6 years old at the time, and this was decades ago, but that day is seared in her memory and will come to define her entire life.
Oh my God, my brothers might not come back to Japan for a long time. So finally, I cried, but still I tried to hide when I was crying, because everybody was shouting, "Long live! Let's meet again in reunified country."
It takes several years before Young-hee and her parents can visit the brothers in North Korea, but in the 1980s, a regular ferry route is established between Japan and North Korea.
Young-hee's parents take a ship called the Mangyongbong from a Japanese port city called Niigata to the North Korean port city, Wonsan. I've been to Wonsan. This is a city with a strong Zainichi presence, and the ship still docked there, but it isn't used anymore.
When it was in use, Young-hee's parents are among the first to make the trip aboard, full of excitement not only to see their sons, but also to glimpse North Korea for the first time. When they eventually get there,
They realized sending children there was a mistake.
More than 10 years after they sent their 3 sons to North Korea as gifts to the North Korean leader, Young-hee's parents finally are able to visit them. But when they arrive, they're shocked by what they see. Their 3 sons have lost a huge amount of weight. They're gaunt. And when Young-hee's mother goes to the black market, one of the only places where people can buy food, she understands why.
My mom saw the price of eggs, price of bread, price of rice. It's totally crazy. So my mom realized that, oh my God. And my mom didn't want her sons to be hungry.
It isn't just hunger. Young-hee's oldest brother suffers from severe depression. There's little her parents could do, though.
It was too late, and the children, never could go back to Japan. Since then, my mom became a crazy sender, sending everything, clothes and books and then sugar and oil and medicine.
And from that moment onward, her parents' loyalty to the regime changed.
My parents still worked as pro-North Korean activists, but when they were in house, my mom sometimes cried, and my father was really speechless looking at their son's photographs.
But despite their private heartbreak, in public, Young-hee's parents doubled down on their commitment to the regime.
My parents told me that they had no choice. They decided to be better activists to protect their children. So watching them makes me feel like my three brothers became a hostage.
Young-hee herself gets the chance, at age 17, to visit her brothers in North Korea. I've seen these trips that Zainichi students make, these pilgrimages to Pyongyang to visit the fatherland, and I have to say I could always pick them out by their hairdos. These young Zainichi men from Japan would have these spiky hairstyles using gel and mousse, and you just don't see that among native North Korean men.
But like that of her parents, Young-hee's trip to North Korea proves painful.
My brothers were surprised that I grew up, and then my brothers were smiling, but I cried and cried and cried. I couldn't say anything.
To help her make sense of what happened to her family, Young-hee ends up documenting their story through several films, including one called Dear Pyongyang. Those movies gave her international recognition, but also meant she had to distance herself from her family in North Korea and the Chongryon, as the Korean Community Association in Japan is known.
Having the community in Japan was very beneficial to North Korea, that's for sure.
Sayaka Chitani is a social historian based in Singapore. She's an academic who's been given a rare access to the Chongryon community and been able to study it in detail.
And she says that for a long time, North Korea acted as the benefactor and supported the Chongryon by helping to finance their pro-North Korean schools, for instance. But as Japan's economy improved and North Korea's deteriorated, the roles reversed, and Koreans in Japan started helping out their fatherland.
And because so many now had relatives living in North Korea, like Young-hee's family, Chongryon's members were often keen to do this. And they weren't just sending food and clothes either.
Individuals started to donate directly to North Korean agencies. Sometimes there is a venture business to build a new factory. Many different ways to contribute to the North Korean economy from Zainichi's point of view.
As another example, an organisation called the Chongryon Science and Technology Association had a mission to contribute to the development of science and tech in North Korea. Some believe that extended to helping North Korea build up its cyber capabilities too.
So Zainichi are considered foreigners in their own birth country, and so they've struggled to secure jobs and make a living. But some have found new, novel ways to generate income.
Korean people couldn't get into old businesses. So when there are new businesses, they could get into that, and pachinko was one of them.
So I ducked into a pachinko parlor in Japan once while I was waiting for a train, and it reminded me of the slot machines in Vegas. You've got these rows of pachinko machines with people parked in front of them, and they're feeding them with these little pinballs. So it is a lot like a pinball machine. And I only bought one tray of balls, but there were far more experienced pachinko players with stacks of trays. And their machines were just lighting up and spitting out more pinballs when they hit the jackpot. So once I got through my tray, all I was able to trade them in for was a little piece of green tea pound cake.
But there's always a backdoor store where you can exchange that gift into cash. So basically, you are increasing or losing cash.
Yeah, this is a slightly strange thing about pachinko parlors in Japan for foreigner. Basically, gambling for cash is technically illegal in Japan, but there's a loophole. So when you win the balls from the pachinko parlor, you can change them for a gift, like Jean did, and there's a little place round the corner where you can take your gift or your token or whatever you've won and change it for cash. So effectively, you are, in the end, gambling for cash.
So I have to admit, I ate my prize. I did not change it back for money. But it is a fascinating part of the community. Pachinko has become one of the Chongyang community's most lucrative operations. It's an industry that generates billions of dollars. Some years it's double the amount that Japan's export car industry brings in. Some estimates say 80% of pachinko parlors are owned by Koreans living in Japan, and that about a third of them have ties to North Korea. So some of that pachinko money is believed to make its way back to the North Korean regime.
And through the pachinko industry, zainichis get introduced to Japan's underworld, the Yakuza.
Whenever a new pachinko parlor starts, there's always a dealing with gangsters, yakuza, local yakuza groups, and that's quite dangerous for any person. Korean people had no choice but to venture into that dangerous businesses and deal with the violence and yakuza communities at the same time in order to make big money and become a bit successful in businesses.
And so ethnic Koreans become a key presence within the Yakuza world.
Zainichi Koreans lived as an underclass people or outcast. So when they are not accepted into the mainstream society, many of them turn to underground societies, including Yakuza.
We should clarify here that most Zainichi today are law-abiding residents who don't engage in illicit activities. The Zainichi I've met are doctors, journalists, small business owners, and filmmakers like Young Hee-young. But the history of marginalization certainly did allow for a relationship to bloom between the Yakuza and the North Korean regime.
高山さんも私よく言っておりますけれども、この今日本のヤクザ
This is Mitsuhiro Suganuma, a former officer of Japan's National Intelligence Agency, speaking in the late 2000s. He's explaining how Japanese authorities are battling a huge narcotics operation. Drugs made in North Korea, brought in by North Korean Yakuza, who then sell them on the streets of Japan.
そしてさらにもっと言いますと、この中には韓国系、あるいは北朝鮮系の人たちが混在しておりますけれども、おそらく我々の
In that same speech, Mitsuhiro also comes up with an extraordinary statistic. Up to a third of all Yakuza members are ethnic Koreans. And this is a figure other Yakuza experts have confirmed with us.
Analysts and a UN investigator have also told us of several examples of the Yakuza making money for the North Korean regime. For a long time, the ferry route that Yonghi's parents took to North Korea was a convenient way to carry cash back to the regime and smuggle military equipment. But the Japanese authorities have now cracked down on a lot of that.
But their operations have simply grown more sophisticated. In some cases, ethnic Koreans working on behalf of North Korea have taken advantage of the fact that they can now gain Japanese nationality and travel abroad to make deals. And that makes their connection to North Korea almost impossible to detect.
We should mention that the loyalty that the Zainichi community once felt towards the North Korean regime is not what it used to be. Things have changed, though discrimination against Koreans in Japan still exists.
I once interviewed a well-known Zainichi soccer player, Jong Tae-se. He was the flashy star of North Korea's national team at the World Cup in 2010, and he was known as the Wayne Rooney of North Korea. And he told me he fantasized about living in a separate country for Zainichi like him, where they weren't a marginalized minority.
So, with all these long historic connections between Korea and Japan, it starts to make perfect sense that Tadashi Sasaki, a Japanese middleman, might be laundering North Korean hackers' money.
So what does this tell us about Tadashi Sasaki and his associates? To start with, though they have Japanese names, they may well be ethnic Koreans.
And even if he's not ethnic Korean himself, he may have intersected with that community, may have been approached by North Korean agents to work on their behalf. The truth is, we just don't know.
But what we do know is that unlike the hackers, Tadashi Sasaki was on the ground. He wasn't working digitally from a laptop, he was physically meeting people. And that means he left a lot of evidence that will lead us right to him. We eventually made contact with Tadashi Sasaki. We had his contact details from his business card, and so we got in touch, and remarkably, he responded. Unfortunately, he wasn't very forthcoming. He told us by email that he had already been interviewed by the CIA and that he didn't know anything about the incident.
But we ended up knowing a lot about Tadashi Sasaki, thanks to that business card. With the help of a Japanese-speaking researcher, we discovered a Facebook account in the name of Tadashi Sasaki. Now, no surprises there are loads of Tadashi Sasaki Facebook accounts. But as we started looking into this, we found pictures of this particular individual. I assumed this was a fake account, but then there's this one guy, different outfits, different places, different times. It's quite hard to fake a Facebook account like that. And then we found pictures of him going to Sri Lanka in 2015. That's the year before the Bangladesh Bank hack went down. And it's not just in Sri Lanka, he'd been to one particular town. I didn't say where it was, so we started looking at the pictures and we found one of a temple in that town. We started using internet searches and internet image searches to try and work out which temple this was. No offence to Sri Lanka's religious devotees, but a lot of these temples look the same. But the cracks in the roof of this particular temple helped us work out where it was. It was in a town called Tisa Maharama. That's exactly the place where the $20 million donation deal with Shalika's charity was brokered. If this Tadashi Sasaki on Facebook wasn't the one who lined up that deal, then that's a heck of a lot of coincidences.
When Shihara and his colleagues spoke to him back in 2016, Tadashi Sasaki claimed there were many layers of people above him and that he wasn't aware that the $20 million was stolen from the Bangladesh Bank. So we looked into the names he provided and the people he was connected to on social media, and they included businessmen, a former politician, someone who appears to openly describe themselves as Yakuza, and several people connected to the city of Osaka in Japan. It's a real rabbit hole, but one door does open.
Among some of the names Sasaki provided to Shihara, the journalist discovered an intriguing link to a city in another Asian country.
They were in Macau.
Macau. That got us interested, because Tadashi's network is not the only link to Macau. In fact, our entire story starts to converge there.
Remember the money that was laundered through the Philippine casinos? Guess where it's thought to have ended up? You're right, Macau.
As you'll find out in the next episode, this tiny enclave is another vital foreign link for North Korea, and that's given rise to some truly grisly episodes.
Macau got into all of the commercial dark arts, and that became its raison d'etre.
You'd wake up and there would be, you had somebody else got bumped off outside a casino.
Someone decided that what they'd been doing was not to their liking.
That's next time on The Lazarus Heist.
The Lazarus Heist is an original podcast from the BBC World Service. I'm Jeff White.
And I'm Jean Lee. Our producer is Estelle Doyle.
Thanks so much to everyone who's left us ratings and reviews and talked about the show on social media. That really helps us get the word out.
And remember to subscribe as well so that you don't miss any future episodes.
And do also please spread the word on social media. We're using the hashtag Lazarus Heist.
Thank you for listening.